Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you are trapped, not by walls, not by chains, not by anyone else, but by your own mind, trapped in habits, beliefs, and fears so subtle that they feel like reality itself. You tell yourself you are free, but freedom is an illusion. You are imprisoned by comfort, by the expectations of others, and by the quiet voice that whispers, "It's safer to remain small." Nietzsche called this the tragedy of the human spirit, the mind that hides from freedom, the part of us that fears the very liberation we secretly crave. Most people do not understand the paradox of freedom. They imagine it as endless opportunity, as an escape from responsibility, as a chance to act without constraint. But real freedom, psychological, existential freedom, is terrifying. It demands awareness, courage, and a willingness to face the raw chaos of existence, and many minds recoil from it. They hide behind routines, relationships, ideologies, and distractions. They trade liberty for comfort, insight for numbness, possibility for predictability. Nietzsche saw this clearly. The greatest enemy of human potential is not oppression, but the fear that lies within our own consciousness. Let me give you an example. Picture a man who dreams of living fully, of pursuing his passions, questioning assumptions, and creating a life according to his own design. Every day he wakes with a whisper in his mind. You cannot. You are not ready. The world will reject you. He tells himself he is cautious, rational, responsible. But in truth, he is hiding from freedom. He clings to a predictable life, avoiding the discomfort of self-discovery, the chaos of decision, and the risk of failure. His mind is both jailer and cell. This is the silent cruelty Nietzsche described, the internal barrier that prevents greatness. Not external forces, freedom demands confrontation with the unknown. It requires you to question beliefs that have comforted you for decades. It asks you to reject inherited morality, societal approval, and the easy assumptions that keep life simple. Most people shrink from this confrontation. They prefer the familiar illusion of security, but the mind that hides from freedom is not truly alive. It functions, it survives, it endures, but it does not thrive, it cannot evolve, it cannot see its own potential, and most tragically, it does not even realize it is trapped. Consider a woman, highly educated and seemingly independent, who lives according to rules imposed by family, society, and culture. She is polite, diligent, and moral. She believes she is making choices freely, but deep inside there is a quiet resistance, a hesitation whenever her life could diverge from expectation. A part of her recoils from asserting herself, from embracing uncertainty, from stepping into the unknown. Nietzsche would say that her mind is hiding from freedom. She fears autonomy not because it is dangerous, but because it is unpredictable. The comfort of obedience feels safer than the terror of liberation. The tragedy of this avoidance is profound. Every unacted choice, every suppressed desire, every fear-driven compromise erodes the human spirit. Over time, the mind adapts to its own constraints, convincing itself that comfort is preferable to power, obedience to courage, passivity to agency. This is the core of dark psychology, the self-imposed imprisonment of consciousness. The mind that hides from freedom is not oppressed by society. It is enslaved by its own fears, its own avoidance, its own subtle, persistent whispers of, "Stay small, stay safe." Now let's go deeper. Nietzsche argued that freedom is inherently dangerous because it exposes the individual to life's most difficult truths. When you are truly free, there are no scripts, no guarantees, and no shields. You must confront your mortality, your desires, your capacity for cruelty, and your responsibility for every decision. For most, this confrontation is unbearable. The mind rebels, clinging to habits, distractions, and illusions. Freedom becomes a threat, not a promise, and thus most hide from it. They trade liberation for the comforting illusion of control. Think of a young man working a monotonous job, living by routines, never questioning authority, never challenging himself. He tells himself he is content. Yet, occasionally, a thought arises. I could do more, I could be more, and immediately he suppresses it. Freedom feels dangerous because it would demand risk, responsibility, and isolation. To act freely, he would have to confront his doubts, his failures, and the possibility of rejection. So he hides. He chooses predictability. He chooses safety. His mind builds invisible walls, and he convinces himself they are protection. This is the quiet tragedy Nietzsche exposed, the voluntary imprisonment of the human spirit. The psychology of avoidance is subtle. Most who hide from freedom do not recognize their fear. They rationalize, justify, and moralize their compromises. I am practical, they say. I have responsibilities. I am being realistic. These are the words of the mind that fears autonomy. Freedom is not avoided through overt rebellion. It is avoided through conformity, distraction, and internalized fear. The very faculties that could lead to liberation become tools of suppression. Intelligence, creativity, and self-awareness all serve as instruments of self-imprisonment when the mind refuses to embrace uncertainty. Here is an example that hits even closer to home. Imagine a brilliant artist, capable of transforming the world with their work, who fears judgment and rejection. They dream of creating masterpieces, yet they never begin, because freedom would force them to confront criticism, failure, and the isolation that comes with true self-expression. Instead, they produce safe work, following trends and expectations. The mind that hides from freedom has chosen mediocrity over mastery, approval over authenticity. Nietzsche would call this cowardice, but it is subtle, a quiet, insidious fear disguised as prudence. And here is the cruelest part: freedom, once avoided, grows heavier. The longer the mind suppresses autonomy, the more entrenched the self-imposed chains become. Habits calcify. Fear becomes instinct. Choices feel constrained, not because life is limiting, but because the mind has limited itself. Every opportunity for liberation is filtered through layers of doubt and hesitation. The human spirit slowly atrophies, not through external oppression, but through internalized avoidance. Nietzsche's dark truth is that the most common prison is invisible, psychological, and entirely self-imposed. Yet, awareness is the first step toward liberation. Recognizing that the mind hides from freedom is not judgment. It is awakening. Once you see the patterns, the hesitations, the invisible walls, you can begin to dismantle them. Freedom is not given. It must be claimed. It requires courage, self-examination, and relentless confrontation with the uncomfortable truths about yourself and the world. Nietzsche argued that this confrontation is painful, isolating, and often terrifying, but it is the only path to authentic existence. Let us return to the young man, the woman, and the artist. All three are trapped by invisible fears. All three hide from the very liberation they secretly crave. Yet, the moment they acknowledge this avoidance, the moment they confront the chains of habit, expectation, and fear, the door to freedom begins to open. It is not easy, it is not safe, and it is not comfortable, but it is real. And the mind that embraces it, no matter how trembling or hesitant, begins to awaken. The paradox of freedom is this: it is terrifying because it is limitless, yet it is liberating because it is authentic. The mind that hides from freedom seeks comfort in limitation, yet the very act of hiding is itself a form of suffering. Avoidance may provide temporary safety, but it comes at the cost of vitality, creativity, and self-realization. Nietzsche's insight was unflinching. Liberation demands courage, and most minds prefer the slow death of comfort to the terrifying exhilaration of autonomy. Now, let us explore the other side of this truth, what it means to confront freedom, to face the terror of autonomy, and to step beyond the invisible walls our minds construct. Nietzsche believed that genuine liberation is not a reward. It is a trial, a confrontation with the raw, unfiltered reality of existence. The mind that hides from freedom must be forced to see itself, or it will continue to live a life half-lived, cloaked in illusion and self-deception. Imagine a man who finally decides to act on his suppressed ambitions. The moment he steps toward freedom, fear strikes with full intensity. He faces uncertainty, risk, and the possibility of rejection. His mind protests, stay safe, return to comfort, retreat. But the difference now is awareness. He recognizes the fear as a signal, not a barrier. The mind that once hid now confronts the truth. Liberation is frightening precisely because it is real. Every choice, every decision, every action bears consequences, and no one else can dictate the path. This is the burden of freedom, and it is heavier than most are willing to bear. Consider the psychological toll of hiding from freedom for decades. Habits calcify, courage erodes, and self-doubt becomes instinctual. The longer avoidance persists, the more entrenched the mind becomes in its cage. A person may reach middle age, realizing that every choice they made was guided not by desire or purpose, but by fear of judgment, failure, or chaos. The mind that hides from freedom is, in essence, a prison of the self, where the walls are invisible but impenetrable. Nietzsche's dark truth is that liberation is always possible, yet most never claim it because fear has become a default state of being. Now, let us examine what it takes to escape this prison. First, awareness alone is not sufficient. Recognition of avoidance is necessary, but action is essential. Freedom demands engagement, confrontation, and the willingness to endure discomfort. It requires embracing responsibility, not as a burden, but as a tool of empowerment. When you act intentionally, aware of your choices and consequences, you begin to reclaim authority over your mind. You shift from being a passive participant in life to an active creator of reality. Imagine a woman who has spent years conforming to societal expectations. She fears stepping into her own potential, afraid of alienation, criticism, or failure. One day, she chooses to act differently. She asserts herself at work, expresses her ideas openly, and pursues passions that society discouraged. Initially, fear overwhelms her, isolation looms, rejection stings, but each act of courage strengthens her resolve. Each choice, however small, chips away at the walls of the mind that once hid from freedom. Nietzsche would see this as the essence of awakening. Liberation is a process, incremental yet irreversible. Dark psychology teaches us that fear is a natural response to autonomy. The mind fears freedom not because it is inherently dangerous, but because it demands engagement with the unknown. Habits, beliefs, and routines provide the illusion of security. To step beyond them is to confront the raw, unfiltered self, the desires, flaws, and potential that we habitually suppress. The mind that hides from freedom does so not out of weakness, but out of survival instinct misapplied. It fears the responsibility inherent in true liberation. Consider an artist who has avoided creating for decades. The thought of expressing themselves fully, unfiltered by convention, fills them with terror. Yet when they finally act, writing, painting, performing, they experience the paradox of freedom's exhilaration entwined with fear. Each brushstroke, each word, each note is a defiance of avoidance. Nietzsche's insight here is profound. Freedom is not comfortable, but it is transformative. The mind that once hid now begins to expand, adapt, and thrive. Liberation, once embraced, reshapes the psyche itself. But confronting freedom is not merely about individual action. It is about enduring the isolation and judgment that accompanies authentic living. When one steps beyond conformity, the world often reacts with resistance. Friends may misunderstand, family may disapprove, society may ignore or condemn. The mind that hides from freedom is shielded from this exposure by conformity. The mind that embraces liberation faces it directly. Nietzsche acknowledged that true autonomy is often lonely, precisely because it demands a departure from collective illusions. Yet loneliness is the crucible in which the liberated mind is forged. Now, consider the practical psychology of reclaiming freedom. The first step is reflection. Examine the beliefs, habits, and fears that constrain you. Identify where your choices are guided by avoidance rather than desire. The second step is deliberate action. Make decisions that align with your authentic self, even when they provoke discomfort. The third step is endurance. Maintain commitment to your path despite setbacks, criticism, and uncertainty. Each of these steps strengthens the psyche, dismantles internal barriers, and expands the horizon of possibility. Let me illustrate with one more example. A man who has spent his life in routine suddenly decides to leave a stable job to pursue a calling he has long suppressed. He faces immediate fear, financial insecurity, social judgment, and the anxiety of the unknown. Yet, step by step, he navigates the uncertainty. Every challenge becomes a lesson, every failure a teacher. Over time, he realizes that the mind that once hid from freedom is now active, dynamic, and alive. The terror that once paralyzed him has transformed into clarity, agency, and self-mastery. This is the Nietzschean journey. Liberation is born in fear, tested in adversity, and realized through persistence. Freedom also demands moral courage. Nietzsche warned that liberation is not merely about external independence, it is about honesty with oneself. The mind that hides from freedom often deceives itself with rationalizations, justifications, and illusions of safety. Confronting freedom requires rejecting these illusions, embracing the truth of one's desires, and acknowledging responsibility for every decision. Ethical clarity, coupled with autonomous action, forms the foundation of authentic living. Finally, consider the broader existential dimension. The human mind hides from freedom because it fears the void, the realization that life has no inherent meaning and that every purpose must be self-created. Most retreat into tradition, authority, or distraction to avoid this confrontation. Nietzsche, however, saw the void as the birthplace of potential. To embrace freedom is to confront meaninglessness and craft significance through conscious action. The mind that hides is trapped by illusion. The mind that faces freedom discovers power. The ultimate lesson is this: the mind that hides from freedom is both victim and jailer. It fears autonomy, responsibility, and uncertainty. Yet these are the very conditions required for true existence. Liberation is not granted. It is seized, step by step, with courage, awareness, and deliberate action. Every hesitation, every act of avoidance strengthens the chains. Every choice aligned with authenticity weakens them. Nietzsche's dark truth is unflinching. Few embrace freedom fully because it is terrifying, isolating, and relentless. But it is also transformative, empowering, and necessary for genuine life. In conclusion, look within yourself. Identify where fear has dictated your choices, constrained your desires, and hidden you from your own potential. Recognize that avoidance provides temporary safety but erodes vitality, creativity, and selfhood. Understand that freedom, once embraced, is never lost. It reshapes your mind, your actions, and your reality. Nietzsche's insight is stark yet liberating. Liberation is terrifying, but living without it is a slow, invisible death. The mind that hides from freedom can awaken, but only if it dares to confront the fear it has nurtured for a lifetime. Step into the unknown. Challenge the internal barriers. Face the discomfort, uncertainty, and isolation that comes with autonomy. Each act of courage is a fracture in the prison of the mind. Each choice aligned with authenticity strengthens the spirit. The mind that once hid can awaken, and in that awakening you discover what it truly means to live fully. The dark truth is this: freedom is not comfortable, but it is real, and the price of hiding from it is far higher than the price of embracing it.